All right, so let's begin the lecture. So I'm going to start by talking about why, for me personally, GIS is an important part of who I am as a designer. So as I just mentioned a second ago, I did have GIS as a professor here at WashU, and this was my project for First Studio. We were looking at the Pruitt-Igoe site in St. Louis, which now is going to become the NDA headquarters. It's going to be the biggest project in St. Louis. Everyone's trying to chase after it. But this was way before that. We didn't know what the site was going to become. And what Gia told me when we were designing the studio is like, I was trying to design a building. I was trying to figure out, well, how do we design a building on this huge, huge site? And I want that building to be super cool and architectural and all that fun stuff. And Gia said, step back, stop thinking about that kind of stuff, and start thinking about it from the point of view of the site. And so what she directed me to do was to just essentially take an underlay of an aerial and start drawing on top of that. Just start to uncover layers of what I saw on the site. And so I started with obviously things like topography, boundaries, some areas where there was some urban development, and a bunch of other things. I can't even remember what this was about. But the point was that she was emphasizing is that when you start to layer everything together, new information begins to be uncovered. And so what I saw was that after I layered all these aspects of the site that I just drew, mostly kind of using my intuition, a design suddenly started to emerge out of that research. And this was what ended up being the site plan. And you can kind of see it's not too far off from the analysis. And so what I unknowingly was doing was actually doing McCargian style mapping. And Ian McCarg, he is known by many as to be the father of GIS. And he specialized in this type of mapping where he used clear, transparent overlays of various features, mostly natural features on a site, and overlaid them on top of each other to essentially create what is known as an opportunities and constraints map. So areas that you want to protect, areas that have the potential to be developed, and areas that really have the potential to be developed. So you can start to develop a hierarchy and create what are known as optimal land use maps. When I was at Harvard, and this ties into this idea, the Harvard Landscape Architecture program emphasized this philosophy is that research was integral to the design process. And this was the professor I had my first semester at Harvard, Pierre Bélanger. He's a really funny guy. And this is my example of cartoons, so yes, I drew cartoons. I drew that. Okay. But he had this quote that I really loved, which is that projects that are under-researched tend to be over-designed. And so this is super true for me. I see a lot of amazing projects from you guys, WashU students all the time, and sometimes the most amazing V-Ray rendered grasshopper design project has no research behind it. And some of the best projects have tons and tons of maps, tons and tons of photography, tons and tons of essays and research behind it, and the actual design project might be just one board at the very end of it. To me, research and design are intertwined in this way, and this is what makes landscape architecture, in my opinion, the design profession of the future. In the future, architects are going to be designing buildings, but they aren't going to be able to do that without the knowledge of landscape architects or GIS specialists. So that's the goal of this course. This is just an example of that same exact methodology of a project that we did at my office forum studio, where we essentially did the same thing, where we just took a site. This is a site in the Daniel Boone estate in St. Louis. And what we did was we analyzed things like slope, we analyzed things like view sheds, so everything that's in green here are areas that are visible from the Daniel Boone estate, and everything that's black or not visible. So these are just GIS things that you can generate straight out of GIS using the geoprocessing tools in GIS. Things related to slope and watersheds, things related to the actual property. And when we overlaid all those together, what we discovered was that there are certain parcels that we could sell because they're outside the viewshed and they are just not developable. And then there are parcels that we can buy. And so this developed a strategy where basically the layers that research ended up dictating what the design strategy was. So we spent most of the time doing all these maps here, and we spent one night drawing this plan. So research leads to the design process, and the more research you provide for your project, the better your project will end up being. And so that's really the goal that you should take with you, the skills in this class as you apply it to your design studio project. That's really the benefit of these tools here. So the takeaway here is that research is a design process, and the act of making maps is an act of creativity. So when you're making maps, it's not objectively putting roads and water features and buildings on a site and just saying, here's what exists. It is about curating what you show and what you don't show, because that ultimately is your design project. So with that all as a background, I always pose this question for every first class I teach, and that question is, what is a map? And so I will just open it up. Anyone can volunteer to answer this question. What do you think? What is a map? How would you define a map?
An interpretation of a certain set of information.
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah, something that provides information in different ways.
Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely correct. Information is what a map is. Yes. Any other thoughts?
Not always, but often it's like layers of information. I mean, not, yeah.
So layers of different data sets.
Often.
I also think that, like, I mean, a map can be a design as well. Like, it can, it's
Absolutely.
not limited to just like a objective.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, that is what I would agree with, is that maps are in fact a design. So this is what I would describe a map as. A map, bless you. A map is an idea. Really, that's all it is. A map is an idea. So there are a lot of ideas in the world. What do I mean by when I say a map is an idea? It's a graphic representation of spatial ideas that serves a thematic purpose. A map is a point of view. So some of you guys, if you study urban design, might be familiar with this particular drawing. This was the situationist maps of Paris. Basically, this guy, he mapped out certain regions of Paris and then mapped out the arrows to kind of simulate how it felt to transition between different neighborhoods. This map is not, say, what you would define as spatially accurate in any sense, but it is a point of view. This is a feeling of one person's idea of this particular city. So this is a map. Maps can be objective, so maps can be things that just literally represent the dimensions of a site with nothing else to it. And this is best represented in surveys. So the way I like to describe it is that plan drawings, the kind of drawings that you do in studio, are maps, but a map is not necessarily, but plans are maps, but maps don't have to be plans, if that makes any sense. So this is an example. This is a subway map. You've seen subway maps before. It's an example of information being presented objectively with not much hierarchy to it. But maps are actually in their best, in my opinion, if they're presented subjectively. And so this, as you analyze, is a cartoon map of our commander-in-chief. It's supposed to be funny, so you should be laughing because it's all right. As you guys will experience through semester, I'm trying to make you guys just chill out and laugh occasionally, so it's okay. But this is a guy, Kenneth Field. He's a cartographer that works for Esri, and he designed this whole map to show his subjective opinion on how our commander-in-chief is tied, literally his huge red tie to the world. So maps can be super subjective, but this is still a map. And this is something that I actually particularly like. It's one of my friends who I studied with when I was at WashU. He drew this map of his memories of living in St. Louis. And so I would not be surprised if a lot of you have a similar impression of the city of St. Louis. If you don't have a car, your only way of accessing the city is via the Metrolink line. Your only knowledge of what St. Louis might be is Wash U, the Loop, Forest Park, and maybe he has Richmond Heights and Brentwood here, so you can go to the mall and so you can go to Walmart. But as you can see, he never really goes anywhere north except for the airport. And he never really goes downtown except to see the Arch, the Cardinals, and maybe a few things here. And as you can see, nothing in North St. Louis. I would not be surprised if a lot of you have this mental map of St. Louis in your brains, because this is unfortunately what WashU, provides you as a way of understanding the city. Is just pretty much this much stuff. Even though St. Louis is a huge city with a lot of cool things to do. This is a map. Subjective. Maps, they've changed across time. This is an example of the aerial view. This has become extremely important nowadays. In my opinion, the best way to engage a client or someone to engage a discussion is to literally print out a huge aerial, just put it on a table, and suddenly people start talking. It's an amazing way to start a discussion if you want to engage a client. Just literally have them see where they are in the world and how we're changing it. Another example of a map that was a famous map. This is a map of the sewers of Paris. You can kind of see how the use of color was used to represent certain aspects of this map. These are just examples that I've collected over the years, and I'm just showing some examples. This is a famous map, the Noli map. This is an example of a figure ground. The figure ground is an extremely important map, especially if you decide to study landscape architecture or urban design. Whenever I start a project at our firm, we always start with a figure ground map because we're designing the public realm, basically the white space between buildings. That's what we care about as designers. And so understanding that inverted space is really key to becoming a good urban designer. Gia loves figure ground maps, FYI, so anyone ever takes Gia's maps or Gia's studio. The idea that maps don't have to represent just one point of view, but they can also represent several dimensions. So you all know cross sections of maps. We could do this as well. Maps that illustrate time. So this is a very, very famous map of the Mississippi River showing the various ways the Mississippi changed over time. So this is not just one instance of it, but the Mississippi over several years of changing and changing. Water is a fluid feature. And this is just really one of the most amazing maps. We try to integrate this drawing into a lot of design work that we do in order to describe how the Mississippi really is a crazy, crazy, dynamic, angry river, because it's always changing, it's always causing problems for us. So, this is a very famous another map as well, but this is a drawing that kind of uses symbology in a way to represent how it felt to navigate a certain space. So this is an interesting example of how symbology can be used to enhance a map. Geologic maps, very beautiful. Maps as poetry. And so this was a diagram of Manhattan, but essentially this cartographer used words as a way to describe his idea of the city. So as you can see, it's just basically an essay. This map here, another example of a subjective map. This person's idea of what America is like. It's kind of hard to read, but if you dive into the actual text here, it's things like gas stations and a lot of gas stations. This person really thinks the United States is just gas stations everywhere. So, and this guy has an amazing quote that I actually quite like. And he says, one of the charms of a map like this is that nothing is anywhere near correct. What are you going to do about it? And she's true. What are you going to do about it? A map is his own point of view. It's his own idea. You can't take anyone's idea away from them, so that's an important note to have. And maps don't have to be a literal representation of the Earth. They can be of anything. In this case, the topography of a human face. You guys might recognize this. This is Gibbons Hall. This was a map that I helped to make a few years ago when I was a student at WashU. Essentially, the idea that how do you make a map for someone who can't see? And so we made this relief map. So we laser cut a board with a relief to it, and then we basically printed on top of that, and then imprinted paper using water just to get the paper to set into the print. and we created this relief map for blind users. Because one of the students, the student who started this research project, I was an assistant on that research project, was going blind. And so she wanted to understand, what does it mean to be a blind architect? And so that was actually an interesting design exercise. This is the wood print that we laser cut to create that. As you can see, we developed a simple system where you put your finger on a circle, and the line guides you up, and it allows you to find, how to enter certain rooms on the first floor of Gibbons Hall. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, maps are just art. So this is an example of an artist who uses maps in an artistic way to express her feeling of what the site is like. And so these are just collages. It's really just meant to be an interior expression of her feeling of a site. It blends reality and abstraction. These are really beautiful drawings. And so if you want to approach this class artistically, it's your choice. I'm open-minded. You can do what you feel like doing. Most of the students have approached this class as a research class. I've never had students ever approach this class as an art class, and maybe one day I will have a student who decides to do that. So it might be this year, maybe it'll be next year, but I hopefully one day we have that. Okay, and then last, well not last, but close near the end, the idea that maps are ideas. There was a very famous article that came out fairly recently. Maybe you might have read this or not, but this picture of our Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, speaking with some reporters, and then in the middle of the interview, he says, "Hey guys, here are the election results," and he passes out these little handouts of the election map, because apparently that's important to him still, after all these years, after all these months, I mean. And this pretty hilarious tweet of a map that's being hung in the White House. This is next class, next week, I'm going to talk about this kind of census drawing and teach you guys how to make this kind of stuff. But if you know anything about the actual election numbers, and you know anything about the population of the United States, you know that this map grossly misrepresents the actual election. Because as you all know, no one really lives here. This is the countryside, no one's here. But what they're doing is they're representing it in a way that makes it appear as if that is hugely populated, when in fact this is not really the story. So this map is not wrong, it's just stretching the truth to like a really great extent. And so map making is actually in a sense almost kind of like lying, almost. And so it's something that, as a map maker, you might have this interior conflict where you think, I'm stretching the truth. It's not really the real reality. And that's really what map making is. It's about making a reality that suits the need of the user. In this case, this map suits the need of its user, which is our president. This is an example of, this is not the recent election, but this was the 2012 Romney-Obama election. You can kind of see that how the states ended up voting is not necessarily representative of the state's particular weight in terms of how much it's worth. So as you can see, a lot of the Midwestern states actually don't have that much weight to it when you actually start to skew them due to their electoral college, which is how presidents end up winning elections, is the electoral college. So I'll talk about this kind of stuff next week, how to find census data, how to represent it in cool ways, and we can start making our own maps like this. So with all that said, I have one thing that I have an opinion about, and that's that maps tend to be very unrelatable. And what do I mean by that? When you watch the news and you see student work with maps and you see what they're about, I can't tell, for me at least, sometimes I don't feel particularly emotionally moved by them all the time, and maybe I don't know if you guys feel the same way at all. I wonder why that is sometimes, is that sometimes you look at data and it doesn't quite move us enough. So how do we bridge the gap between what we perceive with our eyes and what we analyze in GIS? This is a map of the current storm that's happening in Houston, and a map like this, while we can see how devastating the hurricane is, you know, it doesn't compare to when you watch the news stories and you see the photographs and you see what's actually happening there. That moves you. Maps don't quite have that power yet, in my opinion. And so that's really the line that, you know, I think we should think about as designers, is how do we make maps not just vanilla, bland, unemotional? How do we actually get people to react emotionally to our drawings? The example that I actually found extremely powerful was an actual cartoon I saw, and this is related to the conflict in Syria. So, you know, as you guys know, right now there is a war happening in that country, and the civilians of that country are fleeing out of there because they don't want to be caught in the middle of all this conflict. A map like this shows the information objectively, but, you know, what really, you know, changed hearts and changed minds was, you know, that image of the little kid who drowned trying to escape. And so I saw this political cartoon, basically, that kind of represented what the world was to, you know, these people. Basically, you know, we're not caring about these people. We're just, these people are suffering, and all we're doing is just saying, not our country, and don't come in here. So, in my opinion, if we can start to, you know, really, you know, think about how we can, you know, make maps a bit more human, that would be an amazing challenge to tackle, and hopefully maybe some of you guys think about how to, you know, represent that in ways in class. I don't have the answer, honestly, but I'm just saying that's for me, that is your mission as designers, is not to make maps and then say, here's maps, but how to make maps and actually use maps to move people, because then you can actually get people to do stuff, right? You can actually get clients to pay for your building, you actually get clients to, you know, support your project. So let's try to think about how we navigate this conundrum. I don't have the answer to that, but let's just do our best. And at the end of the day, we would just make cool looking maps, that's fine. But I just want to have you guys think about that as we go through the semester. Part of the curriculum that I'm going to give you guys is how to do things in 3D. I almost do all my work in 3D in my practice. So we're going to start with 2D. I'm going to teach you guys how to use GIS in the traditional format, but we're going to quickly move into 3D, you know, Rhino, Grasshopper. I'm going to teach you guys a tool called InfraWorks, which is, in my opinion, the best 3D modeling tool for GIS data sets, so that we can do some really cool looking city models. So this is a GIS data set of San Francisco, basically only 3 data sets: an aerial, a digital elevation model, and just some building footprints. And you can build a city model straight like that. This is InfraWorks. This is just an example of an old 3D drawing of St. Louis, just to kind of say, like, we're kind of following in the footsteps of people who've done 3D drawings in the past. But this is another example of the kind of work you can do in this class, which is model topography really realistically. I have experimented with a lot of different tools in the past, and I think I've found the tool that models topography the best, the most realistically, and the most efficiently as well. So if any of you guys ever feel like, you know, diving into landscape geography and this kind of research field, I have a lot to teach you today, or a lot to teach you over the course of the semester. This image here was an idea that I kind of brought up last year. It didn't really get anywhere, but the idea that, you know, what if we design topography, but then also design cities, imaginary cities on these topographies? And, you know, I wanted to use this class as a way to basically make this image here. Inception, you know, you've all seen Inception. Inception is probably the movie that you saw that made you want to become an architect, because you thought you were going to be like a spy working for some corporate organization, but no, that's not what architects do. We just make apartments. But, you know, we can do this kind of stuff where basically we design cities and then begin to manipulate cities in cool and fun ways. Interstellar has another idea. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Interstellar, but another one of my favorite movies, where the final scene in the movie is on a spaceship that has this cool conical form. This movie that came out in the fall last year, Doctor Strange. I don't know if you've seen Doctor Strange. It's freaking cool. I think it's on Netflix. You should check it out. It's like this where like cities just like are bending and folding on top of each other, and these guys are like fighting and doing action scenes on it. Like, I wanted us to get to this point, but I realized that it's a bit too advanced for a lot of students. They were still making 2D maps. So maybe this year we'll get to this point where we can start having fun and creating cool cities in 3D. Maybe, I don't know. But you should see Doctor Strange. It's really good. It's really funny. This is an example of a 3D city that, you know, I kind of wanted us to get to, with the idea that we take existing topography, then use the topography as a way to design cities. So this is Manhattan. This is a project that one of my professors at GSD, Harvard, worked on, where they took the topography of Manhattan and imagined how would the city look like if you designed with nature in mind and not just laying the grid literally on the city. And then this guy, this is an artist. What he's done is an amazing thing. He has made these collages where he takes photographs of urban areas and photographs of amazing natural areas and just collages them on top of each other to create these imaginary cities within canyons. So this is the kind of idea that I'd love us to explore in this class, where we rethink cities from a geographical standpoint. So you can kind of see like how he's doing that. Like, imagine a city that's within, you know, the Grand Canyon. How awesome would that be? Okay, so we're nearing the end of this particular lecture. This here is your typical population map that you could produce out of GIS. My goal for this semester is to have you guys not make this. Not make maps that look like this. This is ugly, right? Ugh. This makes you want to throw up. We want to make cool maps. We want to make cool maps in 3D that really push things, push our visual capabilities, that make people go, wow. So this is the exact same data. I built this using InfWorks and some photoshopping to add like the clouds and all that fun stuff. But this is the kind of stuff that I think we as designers are able to do better than other cartographers. You talk to other GIS users and they can't even get close to this kind of stuff because they don't know how to use Rhino. They don't know how to use 3ds Max, but you guys do. So if you can take your GIS skills and combine it with your 3D modeling skills, you guys are going to be the best cartographers in the business. And so that's where we want to get to, is really like maximizing our capabilities as mapmaking and designers. And maybe, hopefully, if we get to this point later in the semester, I want to teach you guys this tool called City Engine. This is a tool that I learned while going to several of these like Esri conferences. It's a pretty cool tool. This is the addition to the class this year. So every year I kind of add something new to the class. And this year it might be City Engine. I might not get to it depending on how far we get. But it's a pretty cool procedural modeling tool. So hopefully we get to that. Have you guys heard of City Engine at all? No? All right. It's very experimental, but it's kind of cool. So we're near the end. As you guys work on your projects, you can make your projects look great, you can make them look amazing, but my only rule is no black backgrounds. So this stuff, you know. All these maps here you see were from one class at the GSD that was taught for mapping, and this was, you can imagine this and times it by like 3. All the students' maps were black background maps. Why don't I like this? Because it's a waste of ink. That's pretty much it. And honestly, you don't even need to go this far to have a cool looking map. My recommendation for maps generally, is to use mid-tone backgrounds so that you can go up or down, right? So if you have a gray background, you can have white text, you can have black text, you can go up or down. Your range of symbology and text is increased exponentially just by having a mid-tone background. If you have a black background, you can only go up. If you have a white background, you can only go dark. So mid-tone is the way to go as far as I'm concerned. Unless your project requires a black background. So this is one of the best projects from a few semesters ago. This student, Yuelin Yu, she's a really good student. She made a project about UFOs. So UFOs, You're seeing the night sky, sure, you can have a black background for that one. It makes perfect sense. If it makes thematic sense to have a black background, then go ahead. Otherwise, if you're making a map about, you know, like the location of the best, I don't know, cats in the neighborhood, why would you make it on a black background? You know, makes no sense. Like this one, pet sounds, right here. So, okay, so we're near the end. What is this course about, and why would you want to take this course? So, recap this course. It's the creative application of GIS data for you guys, designers, architects, and other artistic professions. I don't consider this to be a pure GIS course. I'm not going to go around marketing this as how to learn GIS to anyone, because it's not. In fact, again, like I said, there's a lot of even more in-depth GIS courses that are being taught at various other schools here. This really is meant to be GIS for designers. 3D modeling and design is a crucial component of the class, so I really want us to start doing things in 3D. And most importantly, this course is about providing you guys, new ways to expand your creative abilities for your design and research interests. It's for you guys. So a few important pedagogical notes. If you want to take this course, you are expected to invest time and work into your projects. It seems like an obvious statement, but I have to add this note because last year and a few years before, I've had students who sometimes think they can just come to class, watch the tutorials, and then kind of like do like one night's of work for the mid-review. And then I kind of shrug at what they do. That's not really what this course is about. The course is not about you learning these things and just doing a little bit of work for the review. I want you guys to actually invest your thoughts and your ideas into the work. And so that's why it's important that you have research topics and ideas to explore. I will give you the tools and the techniques to be able to explore them, and you got to provide the ideas. And so really think about that. If you guys really are struggling to find ideas of things to research, I actually might recommend not taking this course, just because I don't want you to waste your time, you know, and waste my time, honestly. It's kind of a harsh thing to say, but you know, when I'm having students drop out in the middle of the semester because they don't want to do work for my class, that's kind of doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you take this class and then when the review comes, you say, oh, sorry, I actually don't want to do any work for your class. And I say that because that literally happened last semester, and it really actually kind of hurt my feelings because I was like, why would you take my class? And then my class size was reduced to like 9 students, and like, well, then the wait list, you know, there's like all these students who would have wanted to take the class, like, why would you do that? So that's something you got to think about, you know, between now and, you know, when the drop period comes. Like, do you really want to take this class, and do you really have research interests you want to explore? If you don't really, that's all I have to say about that. And the most important pedagogical note, as students, I say this every year, as students, you don't work for the professor, you don't work for me, you don't work for, who's teaching studio this year? Don Coster. You don't work for Don Coster, you don't work for, I don't know, all the professors have changed now, I don't know anymore. You don't work for, who's teaching studio?
Valerie is teaching.
Eric? Valerie? Valerie, you don't work for Valerie. You don't work for Eric. You don't work for Derek. You don't work for Derek.
I actually do.
Oh. Well, here's the part. Is he actually giving you money?
Yeah.
Okay, then that counts. That counts. You do work for him. But in studio, and in classes like this, the professor works for the student. So what do I mean by this? When you're working your assignments, never, ever, on any circumstances, just do what I tell you to do. So I might come to you and look at your project. I might suggest like A, B, and C, and D. And you might think, okay, I gotta do A, B, and C, and D in order to get a good grade in class. No, that's not what you should do. You should just do what you want to do. You should do what makes sense for your project. And that's really, at the end of the day, what's most important. Your grade will be fine. You guys, as long as you work hard and come to class and do your work, you will be fine. You'll pass my class. I've never failed anyone. Make this class about you, not about the grade. And never ever do what you think I want you to do. Just do what you want to do. I will give you suggestions, but they're just suggestions. They mean nothing, really, at the end of the day. So remember, I work for you. You don't work for me. So if a deadline's coming, it's like, oh, I don't have any time left to work on this project. Oh, what are you gonna do? What you do is you talk to me about it, and I'm gonna help you like figure out how to do it, because I work for you. If you don't do the work for the project for class, I'm still gonna go home and I'll still be fine. So it's not like you're helping me make a living. So that's it. That's the lecture. What I'd like to do now is quickly go over the syllabus. So I'm putting up the syllabus. Okay. So real quickly, a few things. In regards to grades, there's going to be 3 submissions over the course of the entire class. There's going to be a first submission, a midterm submission, and a final submission. You can kind of see how it breaks down here. I'll talk more about that later. Attendance, if you can't attend class, just email me in advance for whatever reason. I'm actually pretty flexible on this. People have reasons that they can't attend class, and that's perfectly fine. If you don't show up at all, you'll get 5% reduced from your grade, so you can kind of see that might add up if you just decide not to come. And if you come late, I deduct 2% from your grade. If you have studio trips, just let me know. That's perfectly fine. If there's a lecture, like a Thursday night lecture or whatever that you want to attend, just let me know. You can go to that. I'm perfectly fine with that. Again, I record everything, screen record, so even if you miss class, you're not going to miss class. Work ethic, all that means is just always be engaged. This is what I meant when saying like you guys should have your own personal research interests that you want to explore. And I would encourage you guys to regularly ask for help outside of class time. In my opinion, that is good work ethic, just showing that you care about what you're doing. Office hours. I work, I have a day job, a 9-to-5 day job at Form Studio. So I can come for office hours after 6:30 p.m.-ish or after classes like now, like after 8:30 or whatever, when class is finished. You can just talk to me and show me your projects. And like it says here, in past, students who ask for help during office hours, they usually actually get better grades. So, and then this is the link here to the YouTube playlist that I would begin to upload all my stuff here. And then academic integrity, please make sure all your work is your own work. I have a funny story about that. Like one day I was walking through Gibbons Hall, I was looking at some degree design thinking projects, and I saw a lot of drawings that I made at Form Studio in student project books. Literally like diagrams that I made for projects, and I've seen them just literally take them and put them in with no reference or credit and that kind of stuff. So I've seen academic integrity being violated in this building before. So all this means is just, when you do your work, just make it your work, that's all. Don't steal. So course calendar, you can read this on your own time. But today, it's going to be an introductory lecture, which you just got. I'm going to have a very, very quick overview of GIS for people who have never used it before. So if you have used GIS before and you kind of know it, this might be kind of boring, unfortunately. I apologize for that. We have to go through the boring stuff before we get to the fun stuff. Next week, we'll be talking about census information and how to find data sets and create your own data sets out of Excel tables. It's a very powerful use of that. On September 14th, I won't be in town, so there will be no class that week. And then a few other things. You can go through this in your own time. First submission is going to be October 5th, so that's the first review for this class. So we're going to work towards that date. I will talk about the first assignment next week. Then in October, we're going to start going to some of the cooler 3D stuff. So I'm going to talk about LiDAR data. I'm going to talk about InfoWorks. I'm going to teach you guys some cool advanced 3D stuff. And then on November 2nd, we're going to have our midterm. The midterm this year is going to be just one-on-one with me. I'm not going to invite any critics. What I found is that the mid-review and the final review actually feel very similar, because students don't really take their midterm project farther after the mid-review. And so we're just going to do all that fun stuff at the final review. So the final review is going to have guest critics, but the mid-review is just with me. I'm just going to look at your projects and give you feedback for that. And one note about review days, I like to start my review days at 5 p.m., so 1 hour earlier. Is that a problem with anyone? Like, is 5 p.m. a bad time? The reason I say that is because this is the 6 to 9 p.m. class. No one wants to come to 6 to 9 p.m. reviews. And so I find if I can push it up 1 hour, I open my options sometimes a little bit for people who want to come to my class. But people don't want to come to a 6 to 9 p.m. review because they have better things to do than come to a class about GIS. So for review days, I move it up 1 hour, and we can end class early. And then in November, we're gonna have an animation project. So we're gonna start taking this GIS data and start bringing it into an animation project. And so at the end of this, we'll talk about how to take this information and start creating cool, fun visualizations out of that. And then maybe we get to, at this point, might get to City Engine, and then we'll have our final review at that point. Any questions about the syllabus? I kind of went through it really fast. Okay, with that,